If someone pushes back against your no or your safe word or your request to pause or anything, that's not okay. And they either don't understand dominance and submission, or they are violating your agency and autonomy, and they are harming you and abusing you because you did not consent to XYZ, or maybe you only consented to X, but not Y and Z.
Welcome to Come Talk with Aimee, the podcast where sex isn't whispered about, it's talked about out loud. I'm Aimee, your host and intimacy coach, here to spark raw, playful, and unfiltered conversations about relationships, desire, and everything in between. No shame, no scripts, just real talk about what really turns us on. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Come Talk with Aimee. Yes. Welcome to our listeners. Welcome to our fabulous guest, Lacey Bond. Welcome, Lacey.
Thank you for having me on, Aimee.
I'm so excited, Lacey, to dive into this topic. You guys, we're going to talk about kink for Kinktober and how kink can be healing, particularly because two of us who are talking to you right now have come from purity culture backgrounds. So Lacey Bond, we have the amazing Lacey Bond with us today. She is a certified sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, and her work focuses on purity culture, kink, and polyamory. Lacey, tell us a little bit more about you and what you've been up to lately.
Yeah, so I'm a post-purity sex, relationship, and intimacy coach. I got into this because, having grown up in evangelical purity culture, I deprogrammed and deconstructed from that a lot, and I didn't really have a path to help me. I just kind of discovered the term purity culture on patheos.com like 12 years ago and was like, oh, that's what happened to me. Interesting. Chewed up gum, you say?
Oh, God. That takes me back.
Although for me, it was a couple of youth pastors gluing two pieces of construction paper together and then tearing them apart to illustrate what would happen to our souls, psyches, selves if we engaged in premarital relations. That youth pastor actually apologized to me like a decade later when she saw me ranting about it on Facebook, which was really lovely.
Wow, that was thoughtful.
Since deconstructing from both evangelical Christianity and the purity culture that came along with it, because those two were very much intertwined and related. When I was going through deconstruction from one, it was deconstructing the other as well. And a big part of my deconstruction from Christianity was because I was seeing double standards and between the gender roles and treatments in the church and in Christian culture in general, and discrepancies between that and the biblical scholarship that I had been doing, because I am a very biblically literate person. I went to Christian school the entirety of my education, including graduating from Biola University, which is one of the three most conservative schools in the U.S. I have to have a Bible minor to graduate. That's 30 credits or $50,000. For those of you who don't know how expensive these schools are. So I use my Bible minor to help people come to a better understanding of and relationship with their sexuality if they happen to come from religious purity culture.
God, I love that. You know, I went to BYU, Brigham Young University, which is a private university, largely Mormon. Not everybody has to be Mormon, but you have to like follow like specific rules and tenets. And part of the schooling is that we have to take a number of religious credits, right? So like Book of Mormon, Bible, like world religions, all of the things. So I hear that. I totally hear that. Yes, you're speaking my language. Yes, I know you have a particular interest and passion about kink. So can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Kink is an umbrella term that encompasses BDSM, fetish, anything typically sexual, like outside the normative or under the taboo. Kink is kind of a broad term, like you can have an insert the blank kink, any number of things. When you have a fetish for something, it usually means it's a fixation on an otherwise non-sexual object or body part, typically that is required for you to get sexual gratification. And then BDSM is a 3-part acronym that stands for bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism. So it's kind of all mashed in there together, but it's essentially the framework in which people explore their kinks. And it's a framework that is based on consent, mutual autonomy and agency, and bodily sovereignty. And the fundamental kind of mechanic of it is power exchange, that dominance and submission. I start with those terms because they're all very broad and not always super well understood. And even within the communities, it is niche terminology overall. So people have slightly varying definitions sometimes. So it's just important to level set. But I got into kink, kind of along with that shared deconstruction over close to a decade, deconstructing from Christianity and from sexual shame, from the faith, from the idea of hell, from the idea that your body and your sexuality don't belong to you, or that they are inherently bad or wrong, or temptations and kind of temptations. Tempting is great.
I know. Now I'm like, before it was like, oh, temptations, like, clutch the pearls. And now it's like, ooh, lean in, temptations.
It's my favorite, persuasive, piece of persuasive wording. Like, oh, can I tempt you to blah, blah, blah? Whether it's like, can I tempt you to pay the bill for me this evening? Can I tempt you to open the door for me? Can I tempt you to spend some time chatting with me about sexuality in the church? So I kind of came into the kink world probably initially exploring kinks through reading fiction or fan fiction. I'm a big proponent of, I don't care, I'm cringed, but I'm free. I'm a big proponent of fan fiction, honestly. There's a ton of really, really good, spicy fanfic out there for free on archiveofourown.com. And in the course of my nerd-ass self reading about my favorite characters, I also started reading about them smashing, because actually, I think the first time I really kind of read something that had the mechanics of sex in it, because I had abstinence-only education in a Christian school. They were like, don't be gay, you'll get AIDS and go to hell. And probably die somewhere in there. I think the first time I read something that was about the sexual mechanics was actually a piece of Lord of the Rings fan fiction in 2004, and I was like, Aragorn and Legolas, you say? Go on. Yeah, so kind of in the course of getting more comfortable with myself and my sexuality and not feeling like I'm gonna go to hell for touching myself or wanting to touch someone else, just kind of expanding, reading all kinds of material and chatting with friends who were kinky. I had a couple of friends who I met after we had graduated from Biola who were polyamorous and kinky and just were telling me stuff about that. And then I also worked at the Ren Fair when I was 21, which was an eye-opening experience because it was full of degenerates and pagans and people that I had been taught would try to take me away from the Lord. And I was like, actually, these people are pretty chill and very nice and open. This was around the time that 50 Shades was coming out, and 50 Shades is not a good example of fan fiction being adapted into original work because it is not well written. There are some fun fantasy elements in there, but good God, I've read better fanfic written by probably 14-year-olds on Tumblr. It was actually Mara Wilson who played Matilda. I had seen a post of hers on Tumblr recommending this other book called the Boss series, which is a consent-based, more accurate representation of BDSM take on the billionaire romance, because she had read 50 Shades and was talking about how bad it was, and people were like, oh yeah, I bet you couldn't do better, and she's like, I bet I can. So the Boss series by Abigail Barnett was a really solid read, and I think there ended up being 7 books. She's a great writer. And then eventually I had a friend who, I live in LA, a friend who would go out to dungeons, and she took me out to one of the dungeons here, and she was into shibari, so rope bondage, Japanese rope bondage specifically. She also introduced me to the concept that not all kink is sexual, because for a good portion of people, it's not sexual at all. For a lot of us, it's not about the sex, it's about the power exchange, the sensation, designing an experience for yourself, because one of the big misconceptions is that it's basically just a dom, usually a male dom, just doing stuff to the submissive partner. And it's really more about exploring and understanding yourself to the extent that you can collaborate with your partner, dominant or submissive, to create a scene or a dynamic that is mutually fulfilling for both of you, which really is what all relationships should be like. And it is probably one of the reasons that people who identify as being in the BDSM lifestyle generally have a really high level of life satisfaction and happiness, because you're taking a very intentional approach to things. I kind of got into it over a period of years and then finally started going out. There's also a goth club here in LA that has a play area, so you can play with a pro dom, and just do a rope bondage scene or an impact scene. They will ask what do you want, how much intensity, are you into pain, because you really don't have to be. Even with impact, which is anything hitting the body, so flogger, paddle, there's plenty of people where there's never any punishments or disciplines. It's just not part of the framework for a lot of people. It's this big spectrum. It's not even a linear spectrum. It's like a color wheel sphere. Going out, kind of reading, learning from people, going out to events with friends, and then eventually going out to more events and doing more exploration on my own. Facebook community groups have been a great part of that.
No, but I agree. The kink community, in my experience, has been incredibly communicative, intentional, literally goals. I'm there's so much that whether you want to go into creating a scene or being part of a scene, the amount of communication and consent, right? And knowing yourself, you talked about, that self-identification is so key in kink. And I think it's just such a beautiful aspect of it, that it's whether you want to be kinky or not, most likely you are, whether you identify as kinky or not. I know one pro dom who talks about just closing your eyes. That's kink, because that is sensation play, right? That's sensory deprivation. How many of you close your eyes during sex? You're not putting a blindfold, but you're treating yourself to sensory deprivation. Anyways, that I could go down a rabbit hole there.
A rabbit hole about kink? You picked the wrong person. We're going to be here for 4 hours.
Going back to kind of the purity culture, can you tell us how your early messages shaped your relationship with your own body and sexuality?
I mean, the big one is that it is not even that it's my body. It's that my body was to be saved for a future godly spouse, to be shared with them. And it's, I didn't get hit as hard with some of these messages as some people in really fundamentalist upbringings do. But that idea that I'm saving myself for true love, waits for marriage. So
don't give yourself away to somebody before you're married.
Don't lose your virginity. It falls out of your vagina and you just can't find it. Listen, there are so many types of virginity that you can lose, that you can experience, or you can have a sexual debut in. The spectrum of human sexuality is incredibly vast and deep, and the tiny sliver of married heterosexual PIV intercourse, just a drop of water in an ocean. So your body, my body is not mine. It is for my future spouse, or it belongs to God, or your body is a temple, which that passage is not about that. It's about not practicing two religions at once. It's not about staying a virgin. Touching yourself is wrong or sinful, and that sexual sin is really bad. Sex outside of marriage would damage me irreparably. I made a reference to the chewed gum metaphor, which is a really common message purity culture people, especially girls, get. Men never get compared to being a chewed up piece of gum. We would get told basically well, if you have sex, then they would compare you to a piece of gum, that if you've had sex, you're a chewed piece of gum, which is the exact metaphor that Elizabeth Smart, who was kidnapped and assaulted for, I forget how long, in the mid-2000s, one of the reasons she did not try to escape, even though she could have, was no one will want me, I'm that chewed up piece of gum. And reading about that in the first few years after I left Viola, and I was oh, so the ultimate end of this is that purity culture is rape culture, because on top of that, it's making you feel like a broken person that you can't say anything because you've been violated and it's somehow your fault. You also don't get any kind of nearly comprehensive sex education that gives you language about your body, whether that's why it's very important to teach young people, young children, what the names of your body parts are, so that if something happens that involves those, they can communicate about it, whether it's something untoward, being assaulted or abused, or if just something burning and you don't know why. Flashback to me at Viola having some kind of sensitivity issue and trying to like Google something about clitoral hypersensitivity, and they're like, this website is of Satan, you can't go here. I don't want to go to a doctor though. Like, I feel like this is easily Googleable information. Do I have to go off campus to a Starbucks? And there was also this idea that like the slippery slope fallacy where like any sexual exploration is going to lead to more sin, and that anything sexual, whether it's with another person or self-pleasure or thoughts, fantasies, was sinful and bad. And American evangelicalism is obsessed with the idea of an eternal conscious torment hell, which is a relatively new mainstream doctrine and was not present in the first century when the events of the New Testament supposedly transpired, or when Paul was writing, etc. Like, this was not an idea present in contemporary Judaism or in Roman or Greek religious beliefs. I forget if it was Augustine or whoever that like introduced the idea, and then the Puritans really ran with that from like the 16 and 1700s onward. And because they were a large part of American history, sinners in the hands of an angry God, we have a very rich history of telling people they're gonna go to hell and suffer forever, which is not necessary, honestly, even to be a Christian. It's just that it's the dominant American evangelical doctrine. So sin equals sex equals hell. Sets you up for a really great and functional adult sexuality and sets up great relationships and everything, especially when we're told it's bad for years and decades, and then you get married and suddenly the flip's supposed to switch and you're supposed to be able to have a functional, let alone great sex life when you've got no experience, or any experience you had was crushing you with shame.
Yep. And all of a sudden you're supposed to just know what to do. And then where do you go? Like, you have nowhere to turn to be like, is this normal? Like, that was my situation. I was like, is this normal? Is that normal? Who do I go and talk to about all of these things? And also for like Mormonism, for people who have gone through, so there's churches and then there's temples, which is you go through and make certain higher promises with God. And when you go to the temple, after you have gone through your first time there, you put on something called a garment. It becomes your underwear.
This is the holy underwear?
Yes, the holy underwear, which I have gone through the temple. I am not currently wearing any, because so now I show off all of the skin, but it's like cap sleeves, and then the bottoms are down to the knees, or basically like just right above the kneecap. And those are your holy, like the where the garments cover, that's your like special sacred areas. People should not be touching the special sacred areas unless it's your husband or your wife in a heterosexual situation, you know? And even then, there's some people will like, do we have sex with the garments on? Can we take them off? There's all of this ambiguity. It's
super cool and good. Oh, the other like big through line that I actually still struggle with is this idea of like saving yourself. You're saving yourself from these like lustful, monstrous men and boys who just want sex, which they get fucked up by that message a lot, because like there's men who grew up in this and they get married and they feel bad for like desiring their wife sexually, even though it's technically within the framework. You can't tell someone they're a monster and out of control for years and decades and expect that they're going to be able to have a functional relationship with their partner when you've been telling them not to lust after that type of thing for so long.
Yeah.
This idea of men being a threat, and like, to be clear, societally, statistically, men do perpetrate a lot of violence against women, but the way it was framed to me left me with a acute sense of fear around men and around sexual intimacy to a degree, which is one of the reasons I identify as demisexual. Not so much because of a low libido, or libido that only engages after a certain level of emotional connection, which is one of the main definitions of that label, but it's because I just need a high level of emotional connection to feel safe enough with a person. It's niche terminology, just like kink is in a lot of ways, where it's just kind of like, okay, what does that definition mean to you? What does that label mean to you? And why? I mean, the why is only important if you're like close enough to the person to like really have those conversations, but like labels are an effective shorthand. We use them as humans for a reason.
Yes. Because you mentioned like going to like play party scenes, dungeons, like coming from this background of purity culture and kind of the exodus out of it, and then going into reading and fantasizing and then being in the environment. How was that first experience for you?
It was really fun. Definitely like the first time that my friend had like taken me out, I was kind of like, I'm not really sure what's like going on here with all of this? Because a dungeon is a different space than a club.
Right.
But at the goth club, everybody's in their club clothes. It's a semi-public, semi-private space, but it's like kind of up in the back corner of the second story of the club. And so that felt definitely like a little bit like more safe and accessible, because it's like, well, like nothing sexual is going to happen here. It can't, because of the nature of the establishment that it's in.
Right.
There's definitely a little bit of culture shock, but it was also like a big feeling of I found my people.
Oh, the heavens have opened.
And so the more
The kink
the kink heavens have opened.
I love that. A sense of belonging.
Again, that is something that kinksters and BDSM lifestyle practitioners self-report a lot. It is a place of belonging for a lot of people, whether you are queer, post-purity, neurodivergent. The structure of BDSM appeals a lot to the neurodivergent, particularly those on the autism spectrum, because it's about explicitness and clarity, and sometimes it is about like rules and rituals and protocols. High protocol is the term for probably what a lot of people would associate as like more of a classic old guard form of practicing, where you have a very marked power difference between the dominant and the submissive partner. There's graduated levels of power exchange, just as there are graduated levels of consent, and you can negotiate on a very granular level, whether it's about the power exchange, the type of play, the length of a session, the scope. Like it is all very customizable, which is why self-knowledge and learning and talking about it is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you talk about kink as a healing framework, what do you mean by that? How is it different from kink just as play or pleasure?
A big part of that is because it provides a structured, consent-based space to explore and accept, and radical self-acceptance is a big part of it. And so when you are coming from a space that does not teach consent, because that is one of the things I meant to mention earlier, is that the sex education that I and many purity culture survivors get does not talk about consent really at all. And if it does, it's basically a very basic binary, you're consenting to the whole thing, when the reality is consent is granular, graduated, should be informed, it's reversible, you need to be specific with what you're consenting to. And I mean, you can write a whole contract about it, but you can also just do check-ins when you are talking with someone or when you are playing with someone of like, okay, like we're making out, I would like to do more. Hey, like, would you like it if I took your shirt off? I want to see more of you. It's a bid for consent. You have to know yourself and feel secure enough in yourself to be able to say yes or no. And one of the big things that I think people find freeing and empowering about kink is that the power of no, or about BDSM, I use the terms very interchangeably, that the power of no is respected, and everything has to be consent based, because essentially otherwise it's abuse.
Yes, and if it's not respected, then that is not a kink part for you.
That's an abuser, not a dominant.
We're here to tell you, not okay, move on.
If someone pushes back against your no or your safe word or your request to pause or anything, that's not okay. And they either don't understand dominance and submission, or they are violating your agency and autonomy, and they are harming you and abusing you because you did not consent to XYZ, or maybe you only consented to X but not Y and Z.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think this part of consent that you're talking about, for me personally, has been like such a part of my healing and in playing with kink, like, and it's so empowering in being able to check in with myself. Am I doing this to please the other person or for my own pleasure because I'm okay with it? Or am I saying okay, but I'm not really? That power of no. And I know like people who I've played with, like it's like a maybe should be seen as a no. We don't like a maybe here. Like we need yes or no. Or what is that? Like I'm going to say maybe, okay, so we're going to take a pause, come back to me when it's a yes or a no type of thing. And that's been like really helpful for me to step into more of being assertive. And I love that. I love that part of kink for sure. Well, I love so many parts of kink.
There's so many parts.
Definitely been a healing part of kink for me.
Yeah. And another healing part is that it provides a space for us to explore parts of us that have previously been unexplored or even denied. And I'm going to preface this with kink is not therapy, but it can be a therapeutic practice, just as many recreational activities can be. And I think that for purity culture survivors, being given a space in which it is not just okay, but encouraged or required to explore and know and accept yourself is just, broadly speaking, really helpful. Okay, so we're going to talk about types of play and types of dynamics. Types of play being activities, types of activities. So impact play, flogging, paddles, sensation play, pinwheels, feathers, fabrics, sensory deprivation, eye covers. There are also
ball gags.
Ball gags. Gags are fun. If you are doing anything that restricts your voice, make sure you establish a motion-based safe word, a safe signal. Usually like pumping a fist multiple times is common, or holding an object that may or may not have a squeaker in it that you can drop, because being able to communicate yes and no is fundamental. So there are different types of activities. There are also different flavors of dynamic or of dominance. Anton Fullman wrote a great book called The Heart of Dominance that breaks it into 6 different flavors: control, conquest, service, devaluation, nurture, and objectification. Control would be more of that high protocol master servant or master slave. I don't love that language, but it is the historical term. Very marked high power differential. Negotiated. Conquest would include things like pursuit, primal play, things like that. Service can also kind of cross over into that high protocol where the submissive tends to be doing a lot of things for the dominant, whether it is menial tasks or helping, run their life, run the household, keep things clean. Devaluation is where like humiliation and degradation play come in, and those can scratch a particular itch for people. Nurture is like nurture or caregiver. This is where the term daddy dom comes in. This is one that I gravitate toward and that I suspect a lot of XVs or purity culture survivors probably also gravitate toward, and I'll explain why in a second. And then objectification is one that I am not as familiar with, at least in the terminology that Bullman uses, but that involves basically dehumanizing the submissive partner, again, in a negotiated way. Sometimes we just want to be a chair or a footstool. And it's, for a lot of submissives, being in subspace or in a submissive mindset, slightly different thing. Subspace is like a chemically altered brain state because of the endorphins and dopamine and everything that's going on for you. A submissive mindset. One of the things a lot of submissives is that it is a chance to turn off your brain with someone that you feel safe handing the reins over to, because you've negotiated. You're in charge for a while, and you know what I like and what I need because I know myself and I've communicated that to you. And so I feel comfortable. Yeah, I'm just a footrest until you decide that I'm something else.
That actually sounds really nice right now.
Like, I would
That's
love
not
to just...
necessarily my kink, but I'm like, ooh, maybe you're unlocking a new one for me.
Listen, I thought I wouldn't be into pet play, and then I saw some like kitty cat ears on sale at an event, and I was like, I could just be like a kitten in a little kitten pile. I think there was also a program that was like kittens and cats, like cuddle puddle hour at Kingfest, and I was like, that sounds great. Again, not sexual. We just want to kind of inhabit like a kitty cat mind space for a while. Like, people already joke about being like a golden retriever or being a black cat, and it's like, some of us have personas and some of us know that about ourselves. I don't know that I have a persona. Furries are a slightly different thing, but it's definitely analogous to pet play. But yeah, so there's a lot of different flavors, and you can kind of cross over in between those two things. All right, do you want to hear about my theory about nurture and reparenting?
Please give it to us.
So in a nurture or care-based dynamic, the dominant partner takes on more of a caregiver role, and that can mean a variety of different things, whether you're taking care of like everything for your partner, making sure they do all their self-care, like keeping them on a strict schedule, or if it is providing a space of indulgence and reassurance that good, you're okay. And this is where like daddy doms or mommy doms come in with a little, or like a baby girl, baby boy, someone that inhabits just like the headspace of, it's almost kind of like harnessing your inner child and doing like inner child work, which is one of the areas where I think this can be therapeutic. Therapeutic. Please also go to therapy. Don't take your untherapized ass's issues out on other people with a flogger. That's bad.
No, we do not condone that.
We do not. But in caregiver-based dynamics, there's often an element of reparenting of just in a targeted scope often of like your partner's inner child, essentially. And I think this appeals to a lot of purity culture survivors because, one, kink operates on the taboo. And for us, all sex outside of that narrow sliver was taboo and wrong. So if you are
Yeah.
involving spicy play, like in your play, being told that it's okay and you're good for doing this, for enjoying it, for getting off, it hits different because it is an embodied experience. And honestly, to a degree, I'm gonna get it, I'm a heretic. You're replacing your old higher power with a new one that you have erected for yourself. Because a dominant is a higher power that you've negotiated with, to the way I see it. And so if your higher
Yeah.
power is, instead of telling you through the voice of your church or your belief system or whatever, like you're bad and wrong for wanting or enjoying this, when it's a very, very normal human experience to be sexual or have desire, having your dominant say, this is good, you're good for enjoying this, good girl, good boy, good puppy, whatever your,
Wow.
title as a submissive is. Yeah, it kind of repaves those mental pathways. And then, like I said, there are a lot of non-sexual elements to kink and play overall. So like being in a dynamic with a caregiver type partner can often come with just a lot of general reassurance, which can be very nice if you're a people pleaser or have poor boundaries from this religious culture or purity culture holdover. And so that's just kind of one of my special little areas, that one that I suspect is very common among purity survivors, and one where I'm very curious to see what the data for the book that I'm researching for will show. Because, just segue into that a little bit, I am working on a book on recovering from purity culture through kink, or kink as that therapeutic practice, because I have noticed there are so many purity culture survivors in the kink world. And whether it's because we grew up with a lot of taboo or like religious baggage, or it's providing us a space to explore, or it's scratching some itch that like is deep inside us that we can't quite get to otherwise, I'm working on the research survey for that, because I would like it to be as accurate and representative as possible, both as a little bit of a guide to like purity culture and kink and their overlaps, but also I want to know what it is that draws other people from this background into this world. Specific flavors appeal to them. Like, I have a theory that most XV or like post-purity kinksters have a praise kink, because it's really nice to be told that you're doing a good job for enjoying a normal experience that you were taught was bad.
Yes. We love a praise kink.
Kink is amazing.
I know, I was telling my friend that the other day. I'm like, you need to tell your partner that you have a praise kink and let them praise you. And they're like, what is a praise kink? And I explained it, and they're like, oh, I think I have that.
Oh,
like, yeah, we got to be praised.
This
I
better
know,
not
I do. I'm
awaken
like,
anything in me.
tell me more. Yes, I love that. So for listeners who might be curious about dipping their toe into the kink scene or the kink play, but are nervous, how do you suggest people go about safety, consent, aftercare, so that kink can truly be healing rather than re-traumatizing? Because also, if you think about like these religious dynamics where there can be the punishment, the different elements that are also there in kink. So take us away.
The first would be, I have some recommended reading. The first one of which is Anton Fullman's The Heart of Dominance. There are also the new topping book and the new bottoming book that are just updated editions of the original, the topping and the bottoming books, by Dossie Easton and Janet Hardy, who also wrote The Ethical Slut. Those are excellent seminal resources. And then BDSMtest.org actually is an inventory that you can take and fill out how you feel about a variety of different ideas and prompts, and it'll spit out like where you fall on a percentage scale of like, hey, it seems like you might be into these flavors. Looks like you're a dom, looks like you're a switch, looks like you're a submissive. I've taken that test probably half a dozen times over the past like 8 years and just kind of watched like where different things have gone, because the self-exploration process is such a big part of it, and exploring with others is a big part of it, which is why vetting and establishing trust and going about these things safely is so important, so that you can learn how to identify when someone is trustworthy. And I talk a lot about like graduated consent and graduated power exchange. When you are exploring, when you do get out into the world, and I'll explain how people get into the world, and you are, talking with potential play partners, you're going to want to start with a negotiated scene. You're going to want to start with fights. And before that, you're honestly just going to start with social events, which are called munches, where it's a no play environment. It's usually just like snacks and hanging out, and it is designed to give people a purely social space to get to know one another, because we're not just kink dispensers for each other. We are whole people. This comes up a lot, like in talking about how dominants are not just kink dispensers, but it is true for both sides, because you both have agency and are equal participants in the co-creation process. It's like an ongoing collaborative art performance process. So for people who are interested in exploring the real world, to find a munch, you would create an account on FetLife.com. Make sure all your privacy settings are updated. The site is not accessible to like Google web crawlers or whatever, but people can, like, the default settings used to be that people could just send you DMs if they're not friends with you. And I don't know about you, but I don't like unsolicited DMs or pictures from people. So you would create your account, update your privacy settings to whatever you feel comfortable with, and then in the search bar you would put in munch and then the name of your city or the nearest like metro area to you if you don't live in a city, to try and find social events. And from there you start connecting with the local community, and like people are so nice and welcoming, and there should never be any expectation of play or that you will play with someone you meet at a munch. It is simply to get to know people in the community, and then by connecting with people in the community, if you add them as friends, it is a social hour. Exactly. There are some dungeons that will do like a munch and then a play party. Just really depends where you are. But the point of a munch is to get to know people for who they are. They're not cruising spaces. They're not meat markets. Like I actually had got a guy thrown out of a play party that was immediately following a munch because he kept like being like really overly direct and like question like with like the femmes present, and we were like, this dude just like is just saying like, hi, are you on fet, what are you into? And it's like, you don't know me like that. I know we're here in this environment, but like, what brings you here tonight? Have you been in the scene long? Oh, you're new? Like, how did you find out about this event? What house are you into? Do you like D&D? Most of the people here like D&D. And so as you get to know people in the community, adding friends on FetLife and seeing like what events they're going to, that's a really good way to find other events to go to. There are also conferences. There is DomCon. There is Kink Fest. There are probably others that are designed both as like a big gathering space for people in the lifestyle, but also as a learning space for like the new or curious or interested. And they will have panels and workshops. Like I attended, I think 4 when I went to Kink Fest. One was on, it was like a deep dive on consensual non-consent and like the deep nuanced understanding of consent and the container that you need. One was on primal play. There was another one on BDSM and the law. And then there was one on like advanced kink techniques that had like urethral sounding and needle play and one other thing that I don't remember because I was only there for half of it, because I've seen needle play. It's not for me. I'm not like terrified of needles, but I'm like, okay, if this is what the last 20 minutes of this is, I'm good. I'm gonna go get a snack. I'm gonna go check out the giant play dungeon that they have that's like 50,000 square feet. Someone gave me this giant template with like 300 lines of all these various different types of kink play and flavors and stuff. It's just this huge inventory of like, are you into this? Are you maybe into this? Or like you'll do it, but you'll tolerate it, or you'll do it and you love it, or you want to try it. Is it a hard limit or a soft limit for you? Hard limit is I will not do this thing. Soft limit is maybe under certain circumstances, requires negotiation and discussion, or maybe only with established partners, things like that. If you're a data nerd, you can you can go that route, but developing the sense of here's what I'm into, what I'm not into, what I might be interested in, and then talking about like, okay, what is it about that interests you? Would you want to try it in a scene or with another person, or do you want to just talk about it like I do that? Do you want to hear about what it's like? Do you want a demo? Stuff like that.
So we've talked about parties too, like voyeurism. That's a great way too to like watch people experiencing certain kinks and that kind of a spot. Maybe that's something I would like to experience.
There are different types of events. There are intro events, taster events. 910 WeHo is a big dungeon here in LA, and they do arrivals and taste, 2 different events. One's a taster event and one is like for newbies. I think they might have one other one that's like newbie oriented. And often the dungeon will have an orientation of like, here's the space, here are our rules. If you want to voyeur, that's fine, but check with the DM first, because some dungeons consider a voyeur a part of the scene. You can't have someone part of the scene unless it's like agreed upon. And a lot of them also have specific rules about like solo masturbation, unless it's like cleared with the DM that this person is voyeuring us and it's okay. Like this is all very consensual. And like the net of consent gets cast even wider, which is really cool because the viewer
Yeah.
is part of the experience. There's a lot of different types of events, and usually FetLife is the place to find them. It's a little cumbersome. It's not the most user-friendly website. It is where they all are, and they'll usually have a description of who it's oriented toward, whether you need to be a member of the dungeon to go, or being a member gets you a discount. There are different types of dungeons, and there are different types of parties, different types of play parties. A play party is not the same thing as a sex party. Yeah, some dungeons allow sex, some do not. It really varies, like the level of sexual content that is contact that is okay. It really depends on the venue and the event. And so there are a lot of events that are oriented towards the beginner. And if you are in LA, I actually do a dungeon buddy service where I will introduce a client to, like, I will vet a client. We'll mutually have a call to vet for mutual safety because I typically work online. But if I'm going to meet someone in real life, you're paying me for a vetting call, and we're going to both level set about safety and expectations. And then I will take them to a munch, and we'll prep for the munch. We'll hang out there. I'll introduce them to people. We'll debrief afterwards. And if they would like to go to a dungeon event after that, we can go from there. I'm basically just there to hold your hand. It's a subculture. It's the subbiest of subcultures.
Yeah.
Or the dommiest of subcultures. It's definitely like can feel a little intimidating to like go into. I mean, honestly, I offer the same service for people who want to go shopping at an adult store for the first time because it's a similar just like, I don't know, this is a really different environment and I don't know what to do and I don't know if my questions are dumb. I'm like, it's okay. Let's talk about rabbit vibrators and Hitachi magic wands.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's say somebody they've experienced their healing experience through kink. We talked a little bit about this. How does it trickle down into like everyday life and relationships outside of the bedroom, outside of the scene?
I find that helps you develop better boundaries for yourself and more of a sense of empowerment because you know yourself better, and understanding consent more gives you more power to say yes and no, or to say no and feel better about the things you're saying yes to. Because one of the things that I think a lot of purity culture survivors carry over with them, a very poor sense of personal boundaries, whether it's because you were never taught to say no or you were taught that self-sacrifice was the ultimate goal. So boundaries being such an important part of BDSM, helping you develop those just carries over into the rest of your life and the way you relate to other people outside of the dungeon, regardless of what it is you're doing with them.
Yes. And I will add, like, coming full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning about you're learning in purity culture that your body, you're giving it to somebody. Your body is not your own. I feel, and it has been my experience, that kink allows you to own your body as your own. We're giving it, like, whether in the scene or however you're playing and you're allowing to be played with, because of that consent, because of the boundaries, because of the communication that is put in place. Like, it really is like, this is my body, that is my ownership. And even if for the scene, I'm giving away ownership of my body, but this is something that I am willing to do and I am choosing to do for the scene and I am consenting to do in an emboldened, empowering way because it is mine to give.
Exactly.
For the scene and mine to take back.
Exactly. And even in like 24/7 or total power exchange type relationships, that is still negotiated and you're still ultimately retaining your agency. And if a dynamic or something is not working out, either party can renegotiate and change it at any time. Because you don't want to be overriding someone's agency, like at a true fundamental level. Even if they like being your bitch all the time as much as possible, only if that's what they like and if that's working and sustainable for them and sustainable for you, because doming takes energy. It's similar to the roles of lead and follow in dance. Honestly, the dance culture and kink culture are very similar, where leading and following, it is co-creating. It's not just, and this is like more of a modern interpretation, both of these things actually. The lead or the dominant is not just enacting their will on the follow or on the submissive. You're co-creating a shared experience. experience. You're creating a dance performance or a dance experience, because not all dance is performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an exhibitionist, then yes, it is a performance. You are still choosing to share a part of yourself that is important and does carry a lot of emotional weight, whether it's because of the way you're socialized or because of the chemicals that your brain releases when you are physically intimate with someone. It is something that you should approach thoughtfully and with knowledge of yourself and your body, which doesn't happen often in purity culture. Even if you like do everything right and you get married, it's like, well, you still don't really know anything about who you are as a person or who you are as a sexual being, because you were never allowed to think about that.
Lacey, before we wrap up, I would love to go into what are some of the more common wounds that you see in purity culture survivors, like, and how do these show up in the bedroom or in their ability to feel safe with intimacy?
Your ability to feel safe with intimacy, that is honestly the core of a lot of what I do. Honestly, a lot of what I do is teaching people how to talk about sex and how to connect with and understand themselves, because that's where being able to talk about and communicate sexually comes from, and creating a sense of shared safety between you and your partner is really crucial for a healthy sex life. But common things that I see, I mentioned a lack of boundaries is very common, a propensity to self-abandon or self-sacrifice, particularly for women. Men often come away with this complex about being monstrous for having sexual desires, and it's like a little bit different. Like, 'cause for women it's more, oh, I'm just like wrong and broken for wanting sex. Women who feel bad for wanting sex, more of like a I shouldn't be built this way, versus for men I think it's more of a like, I'm intrinsically a monster. Arrested Development, I'm a monster.
I'm a monster.
I'm a monster. Discovering sexual incompatibility years into a relationship, an overdeveloped sense of guilt or of personal responsibility, where like if you're personally responsible for keeping your brothers in Christ from sinning, or for, often Christian marriages in particular, women tend to have an overdeveloped tendency to like regulate their partner's emotions. I mean, this is common in a lot of marriages and relationships, but it becomes more pronounced when you are coming from a culture that often has a very hierarchical power dynamic of Christ at the head, and then the husband, and then the wife, and then the children, which is a very complementarian framework that not everyone in the Christian umbrella does that. I actually have a video on BDSM versus biblical submission on my Instagram and TikTok that kind of breaks that down a little bit, because as I've established, it's about negotiation from a place of mutual sovereignty and very consent based in BDSM. But those are some of the common things. And so I find that basically introducing or reintroducing a person to themselves, guiding them, holding their hand, I'm a hand holder, guiding them into getting to know themselves and feel comfortable with the fact that they are sexual creatures, whether they are like very sexual, allosexual, demisexual, asexual, like all of these are healthy and valid expressions of human sexuality, and it is absolutely okay to be ace or demi or gray sexual and like really not want sex. Also totally fine. I find that presents less than the feeling wrong for wanting sex. So basically reacquainting people with themselves as sexual beings and autonomous beings, when it's more like relationship based than sexual dysfunction, and pairing that with the deconstruction of shame and helping differentiate shame from guilt. Shame, the commonly cited Brene Brown fit is, shame is I'm bad for who I am, or because of who I am, or the way I am. And guilt is like I've done something wrong. I have harmed someone else. If you're actually harming someone else, you've done something that's wronged or harmed someone else. Like, yes, that is bad and wrong, and you should try to address that with the person and do, reparation. Shame for simply wanting sex. You're not bad for simply being a human. That is part of the general human experience. 99% of human adults are allosexual rather than being asexual. Like, they have a libido and they enjoy engaging in sexual intimacy. So basically it really comes down to hand-holding through shame and reacquaintance with the self, and providing, graduated education and exploration and tools for the person to move that needle. In sex education, there's a model called Implicit, where you provide limited information and you basically meet the client or patient or whoever it is, or student, whatever context you're educating in, with an appropriate amount of information. You don't want to like rock their entire foundation, because that's not super helpful. You're basically helping them move the needle and providing
TMI method.
Having your foundation rocked can be really great, but it's generally like kind of a moving the needle thing. And I do take a very client-led approach in my coaching work, where I'm not super directive unless a client is coming to me specifically wanting directed education on a certain front, like polyamory. This happens a lot because it's very niche and there's not a ton of resources. diagnosis. There's some great books, but having a person that like you can ask questions of is a really big thing for a lot of people. So, and then the rest of the implicit model is referring out to therapy or intensive therapy when it may be warranted, which I do. I'm not a therapist, I am a coach, but I work with a lot of sex therapists, and sex therapists are awesome. And there are certain things that I can do that therapists can't, and that therapists can do that I can't. They can diagnose and treat mental illness and really like work with trauma. I am trauma informed, but like I have so much respect and love for my sex therapy colleagues. Sometimes like you'll work in a triad situation where the client is working with both a coach and a therapist, but basically giving autonomy and agency to my clients so that I can hold their hand while going along with them, like holding up a light, showing the path. Okay, which way do you want to go? I'm going with you.
I love that. Lacey, this has been amazing. I always hate the wrap up, and we got to do it. But before we leave, I always say we need to come to completion here at Come Talk with Aimee. Do a little rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's come to completion, Lacey. Okay. So, question number 1, safe word you'd pick if you were a fruit.
If I was a fruit, or if the safe word had to be a fruit?
Yeah.
I'm a little fruity already. I'm gonna go with banana.
That's too funny. Banana. Okay, your banana is your safe word. Got it. All right, love that. Okay, so if you had to choose rope, paddle, or blindfold, what is your go-to?
Can I say flogger instead of paddle?
Yes, you can. We love a flogger. All right, some impact. For me, it's yes and yes. All three at the same time, please. Thank you. Yes. Biggest kink myth you wish you would just die already?
As a toss-up between it's all about sex and pain, people not understanding that the submissive is an equal partner.
We love those. Okay. Aftercare snack of choice, chocolate chips or cuddles?
Chocolate chips while cuddling.
Yes! I love it. Again, all of the above. A little melty, a little crispy, a little cuddly. Yes. Okay. Your sex playlist vibe, R&B, slow grind, angsty alt rock, or total silence?
There's an artist called The Midnight that I highly recommend.
Okay, I'm going to look into that.
Kind of a synthwave jam vibe.
Right. Love that. We love that. Okay, so first word that comes to mind when you hear purity culture.
Gross. The first one was fuck that. Toss up.
I'll take both of them. Okay, if kink were a superpower, what would yours be?
Telepathy. It would be great if I could just not have to verbalize. I kind of go nonverbal sometimes, and it would be nice to just vibe into the partner's mind.
That would be fabulous. Just like, you know what I want, here it is, you know what we've consented to, what my safe words are, like when to stop, da-da-da.
Or being able to identify fake doms and just point them out for people. I mean, I'm pretty good at that anyway, though, so.
So if you were going to go to a desert island, what's one tool or toy that you would be bringing with you?
I'm assuming it magically has power. Hitachi magic wand.
Yeah. Ooh, okay, a classic. We love that. Lacey, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for giving us so many gifts of knowledge and kinky aspects to like revel in. Yes and yes. Some great reads as well. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners find you?
My website is intimacylacey.com. That's Lacey. There is a section about my book research if you're interested in participating in that on there. I also do free consults. There's a big button if you want to talk to me, and I am on Instagram and TikTok under @intimacylacey.
Amazing. And we'll definitely put all of your contact information and what you just shared with us in the show notes. Thank you so much, Lacey. Thank you for our listeners for being here. You know the drill. If you loved what you heard today, share it with a friend, share it with your grandma, a frenemy, your partner, your play partner to be. Like, subscribe, and as always, remember to lubricate, masturbate, and get 8. Yes. That's all for today, lover. Remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get 8. If you liked this episode, share with a friend, like, subscribe, and as always, thank you for coming
Please come again, and come again.